Everything that I've ever done in the legislature, I learned from you. I've learned from this community. I've learned it from my colleagues, my friends, my supporters. I want to thank Justin Rodriguez for letting us have this event in his district. Well, Justin's phenomenal. Relationships matter. Justin and I have been friends before he was in elected office. He was a rock star on the school board, and his calling came to be a leader for our community and the city council. And when he was done with that, he decided to take that voice up to Austin and take a seat at the Committee on Public Education and be our voice for strong schools and strong resources. But most importantly, he is a very proud daddy and a loving husband. Justin, thank you. Helen Luna is an amazing woman. She's here in the front. And when I saw her this morning, I said, I had my prepared remarks, and I wanted to learn a little bit more about Senator Luna. So I went and did some research, and I found something I'd never seen before. And it's really crystallized my reason for running, because in Senator Luna's final days, there was an attempt to bring voucher legislation to the floor of the Texas Senate. And you would expect Senator Luna to be in Austin on the floor of the Senate fighting. But he was in room 611 at the Methodist Hospital, and he was fighting for his life. And in those days, he wrote a letter to then Lieutenant Governor Rick Perry, and he said, I am committed to fighting vouchers at all costs, for I passionately believe that they are destructive to public education. Helen, I couldn't agree more. In his final days, he never lost sight of the mission, the promise, and the dream that all children, no matter where they are, no matter what zip code you live in, that they have access to a free and public school supported by our community, invested in by our community, and cared for by our community. And when I'm in the Texas Senate, that is never going to change. Teresa Vale has always humbled me, has always humbled me. In 1999, a young whippersnapper, fresh out of UT Law School, at the age of 28, started knocking on doors to become the next state representative for this district. And Teresa said to me, I like you. You remind me of people I know. I know a little bit about the legislature, but you're so new and you're so green, and the person you're running against has seniority. Are you sure this is what the best thing is for you to do? And I told her, Teresa, give me a chance. Let me go door to door. Let me make my case to the voters and let them decide. And so if I'm not ready to have your blessing, let me earn it. And over the course of my 14 years in the House, I have earned it day by day, session by session, election by election. And today she is proud to be with me, representing the Vale County for the Texas Senate. And the man who just introduced me and who's agreed to be my treasurer is the giant that we stand on his shoulders. If you think about this district, if you think about the history of this community, there were giants that came through here. Matt Garcia, Joe Bernal, Bob Bale, Greg Luna, Leticia Vanderpute, Orlando Garcia, giants. And Joe Bernal had taught me something. And I've observed him, and I've listened to him. And being involved in voting rights litigation, thinking that, wow, I can't believe I'm doing this. If you read those cases in the 1970s, you will see Supreme Court opinions with Joe Bernal's name on it. He stood there. He talks about the courthouse because he's been in the courthouse. He has been that voice. While he could not win on the floor of the Capitol, he fought in court for civil rights. He fought in court for voting rights. He fought in court to make sure that we all had a say in the future of San Antonio. Joe Bernal has taught me two things. So when you go to Austin, you got to deal with lobbyists, you got to deal with Republicans, you got to deal with people who have interest opposed to you. You can either be feared or you can be loved. And Joe taught me, I'm loved at home. And Jaime Lopez, the owner of this restaurant, and Mrs. Howe, my history teacher, know that I know a thing or two about fighting, and I will choose fear over love in Austin any day of the week. And all of you are here because you're part of my family. You're part of my public service family. I also want to take a moment to introduce my family, who is also part of our public service family. But more importantly, they're the ones that bear the brunt of the sacrifices you make for public service. I start with my loving wife, who is a dedicated public servant herself, who's a respected lawyer in our community. Yeah, I hadn't even finished, A dedicated mother and my best friend, my wife Elizabeth Provencio. My babies, my little girls, I wear their initials on my sleeves and remind me every day about how important this fight is. Lets me know very quickly just how important these issues are, and have taught me to know that there's nobody better to stand up for them than me. And that's my 5-year-old Francesca Maria, my 4-year-old Camila Marie. Where are you, Camila? Of course, you know, my mother, who was here earlier, has a series of bad days and good days, and today she was here with us this morning. It was time for her to go home. But she taught me a lot. And those of you who were with me back in 1999, a lot of friendly faces. Mama was a campaign manager, and she got it done. And I know my mother-in-law, who's very lucky and fortunate to come from the state of New Mexico, where there are lots of Democrats everywhere. She says, I want to meet one from San Antonio, so she came down. Velma Provencio, thank you for being here. And my goddaughters are here, and I'm going to talk about some of them in a minute, but I also want to recognize somebody who is the daughter of a man who was great and missed and loved in this community. And when he first came to this campaign back in 1999, he saw what was needed. He saw what was required to win. And every day, Shelton Padgett was my wake-up call, and every day he was the guy who tucked me in bed at night. His daughter Nellie is here. Nellie, we're glad you're here. So God gave me the build of a Holmes High School Husky linebacker. My mother gave me a voice to say, never forget where you come from and always give back to a community that's given you so much. My family, and in particular my Aunt Maria Elena, tried her best to smooth out my rough edges. And I'll tell you, Pia, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. There are times to make a deal, there are times to be nice and polite, and there are times to fight. I know the difference. I know which personality to bring, depending on the circumstances and depending on who I'm dealing with. And I always, in thinking about you, I will always negotiate and leverage and fight from a position of strength. I will never compromise. In 2011, Republican lawmakers cut public education by $5.4 billion for the worst reason possible. Because they could, because they had the votes. They had 101 Republicans in the House, and that was what they wanted to do, and they did it. And in 2013, when we came back to work with a few more Democrats and a little bit bigger resolve, I waited impatiently for 28 days for Republican lawmakers to declare public education an emergency. And on the 28th day, I got up all by myself. I took the microphone that Justin Rodriguez talks about and I said, Mr. Speaker, when are we going to declare public education an emergency? Of course, he did not know what to do, did not realize that we can declare emergencies in the House, but the rules say with 120 votes you can. And so I asked the Speaker of the House, Mr. Speaker, when are we going to suspend the constitutional rule to declare education a priority? We need 120 votes. I have 55 Democrats that are ready to vote for it. Bring me 50 Republicans. Let's make a deal. They did not know what to do. That was the spark that led to the debate. That was the spark that put Republicans on the defensive, and that was the spark that brought $3.93 billion back into education cuts, restoring those cuts. And we don't get that by sitting on the sidelines. We don't get that by saying we're going to compromise or we're going to sit at the table. You get it by having the guts to stand up, even if you have to by yourself. You get it by having the voice my mother gave me to build a strong coalition with Justin and Roland and the delegation to leverage a deal, but to do it from strength. I remember very, very deeply, out of $5.4 billion cut at the end of the day, after a long and just really, really focused conversation, after we received nearly $4 billion in restored public education cuts, Republicans told me, well, are you happy now? And without blinking an eye, I looked back at them and said, when do I get the other billion for? You know this, I will never quit on you. I will fight day and night. I may get knocked down. I will get up, dust myself off. I will get back in the ring, and I will fight until we have what we need to be the community that we are. And I will tell you this, in 3 areas, there are some clear differences between me and my opponent. When San Antonio needed some jobs, they went to my opponent to talk about an opportunity to bring very well-paying airline manufacturing jobs to the city of San Antonio. He said no. When they came to me, I said, I'll file that piece of legislation, and I passed it with a compromise, working with Republican leaders on Ways and Means Committee, and because of that, there are hundreds of well-paying jobs for Boeing at the Port of San Antonio, and because of that law, the Dreamliner is retrofitted and worked on here in San Antonio, and more important than that, Air Force One now has the ability to be repaired and restored and retrofitted right here in San Antonio. Wow. When Mayor Julian Castro, when he needed a single and sole priority, and that was to get Hemisphere Park reorganized, that was his only piece of legislation that he really cared for. And it was his priority. In the final days of the session, it was dying. It was dying for 2 reasons. Our delegation had a dispute as to what the purpose of the legislation should be, and Tea Party Republicans wanted to kill it because they did not like Mayor Castro's very clear political rise. Ruth McClendon, the leader of our delegation, put us in a room and said, we are going to come together with language for Hemisphere, and we're going to march outside on that House floor, and we're going to win this vote. Members of the delegation went to a back room, like Justin often said. We presented our proposals. I offered a proposal that received every vote in that meeting except for 1. We went out there as a delegation, and we passed that legislation for Mayor Castro, and only my opponent did not participate in that discussion. I was there for San Antonio, he wasn't. When it came to education, aside from the $3.9 billion, aside from the constant fights we have, there was an amendment in the final days of the session that said only in San Antonio Bear in mind, we're a 25 million population state, 254 counties, but only in San Antonio are we going to take public schools and fast track them to convert them to charter schools. San Antonio delegation was up in arms, beginning with Roland Gutierrez, who was in the middle of the fight. He alerted the delegation alerted the floor that this was not a fight that we wanted to be in. But those in charge who believe in charter schools thought it would be a good vote and a good win for charter schools, and everybody worked the floor. Everybody worked the floor to try to defeat this amendment, and unfortunately it failed. We did not have the votes. And I'm known for knowing a thing or two about the rule book, but I have to give credit to Representative Gutierrez, who alerted me to a special rule that I hadn't been thinking about. And without concurring with him, I grabbed the rule book, I ran to the back mic, and I killed the bill on a point of order. And that bill could not leave the House floor. San Antonio would not lose its public schools because it was dead for the rest of the session. In killing that amendment and voting against that amendment, everybody voted on that proposal except for my opponent, who was seemingly absent, excused on that vote. And what's interesting is he had just registered a vote a couple minutes before that. You can't take a day off when it comes to leading our community. There are no mañanas when it comes to leading this community. In Austin, sometimes it just seems like mañana is the busiest day of the week. We never get to it. All the priorities just get kicked down the road. When it comes to leading this community, when it comes to being the next senator of this district, there are no mañanas. Leadership is a 24-hour day job, 7 days a week, and we do it, and we do it as a team. Let me go ahead and wrap up by saying a couple of things. My grandmother used to tell me who your friends are, and I'll tell you who you are. You've heard that? Has anybody heard that? Yeah. When I started this campaign 3 weeks ago, the first words out of my mouth had words like this: Joe Bernal, my treasurer; Helen Luna, supporting this campaign; Teresa Vale, supporting this campaign. And then I also said the Bexar County Democratic House delegation, led by Ruth McClendon Ardeen, Joe Farias, Roland Gutierrez, Justin Rodriguez, the entire delegation except for myself, Mike, who's running for mayor, and my opponent, said, we're with you. Joaquin Castro said, I am with you. Mayor Suzanne De Leon from Balcones Heights, I'm with you. Councilwoman Shirley Gonzalez, I'm with you. Councilman Ray Saldana, I'm with you. Councilman Chris Medina, I'm with you. My first words on this campaign was about you, was about us, was about our community team, our community's voice, and how we're going to win this Senate race together. My opponent last night made his first official announcement, announced that he was running for the Senate. I wanted to congratulate my opponent, and I did. And we are friends, and make no mistake, I respect him. But I have said this very clearly, that my friendships will take a back seat to fighting for you and representing this community. And while we are friends, the gloves are off. We're going to make a clear choice in this race on who you want to represent you in the Senate. And so I look through my grandmother's memory, who is he and who is he with? And the first official release from him is, I'm with Republican donors, I'm with Austin lobbyists, and I'm with special interest groups.
No, we're not going to allow that.
And I will tell you, déjame decirte muy claro, muy específico, yo estoy contigo. I'm with you. Because when the chips are down, and when it comes to fighting Dan Patrick, you want somebody who's going to stand up and fight with him. And when I look at this list for my opponent, it seems to me that Dan Patrick has already made an endorsement in this race, and it's with my opponent. And when you look at the record of Dan Patrick and you know what he stands for, and you know the things he said about our revered and our loved Senator Van de Putte, this is a man who says that immigrants bring diseases to this country. This is a man who says we are going to take away in-state tuition for undocumented children. This is a man who says not just no to healthcare expansion, but he says hell no. This is a man who says we are going to invest in vouchers and charter schools and not public schools. This is a man who voted against a budget that put $3.9 billion back into public schools. Dan Patrick no es nuestro amigo. He is not our friend. And I have news for my opponent and Dan Patrick. Together, all of us, we're going to the Texas Senate. And we know a thing or two. We know a thing or two about coming together as a community. We know a thing or two about fighting the fight. We know a lot about never quitting and never giving up. Nothing in San Antonio had ever happened without a unified effort to make it so. It'll happen in this race. You will see it happening. There'll be an election. It could be in December. It could be in January. But when it happens, I need you to be with me. We will do this together. We will go to Austin, and we will sit at that table, and we will negotiate always from strength. Let's go. Let's go. Vote. Adelante. Thank you.